You earn six figures, maybe even multiple six figures, yet somehow you're still living paycheck to paycheck. Your salary would have seemed impossible to your younger self, but despite earning more than 90% of the population, you can't seem to get ahead financially. You have money coming in, but it disappears as quickly as it arrives. You tell yourself it's because of high taxes, expensive living costs, or necessary professional expenses. But what if I told you that your high income is actually enabling a spending addiction that's keeping you financially trapped? Freud discovered something disturbing about high earners. Earning more money doesn't solve spending problems. It amplifies them. Right now, you probably have a lifestyle that requires almost every dollar you earn to maintain. You've upgraded your home, car, clothes, dining, travel, and entertainment to match your income level, creating a financial prison disguised as success. The more you earn, the more you find ways to spend, and despite having a high income, you have little actual wealth to show for it. Your paycheck feels like financial life support rather than wealth building because you've become addicted to spending at the level of your earnings. Tell me in the comments, what percentage of your high income actually makes it to savings each month? I can see from your responses that very little of your high income reaches savings. But here's what Freud discovered about why high earners can't stop spending. Your brain treats increased income as permission to increase lifestyle rather than opportunity to increase savings. When you got your first raise, promotion, or high-paying job, you didn't think, now I can save more. You thought, now I can live better. This psychological pattern creates what economists call lifestyle inflation. But what's really happening is spending addiction enabled by higher cash flow. Each income increase triggers a reward-seeking behavior where you upgrade your life to match your new earning level. You justify these upgrades as rewards for your hard work or investments in your professional image, but they're actually consumption choices that lock in higher fixed expenses. The psychological satisfaction of upgrading your lifestyle provides temporary happiness, but it also creates new baseline expectations that require sustained high income to maintain. You become trapped in a cycle where you need to keep earning more just to maintain the lifestyle your previous raises enabled. Your high income isn't creating wealth, it's funding an increasingly expensive lifestyle that keeps you financially dependent on your next paycheck. Your stories about lifestyle inflation reveal common patterns, but Freud discovered something even more disturbing about high earners and spending. You use money as emotional medication for the stress, emptiness, or dissatisfaction that high-pressure careers often create. Your demanding job provides income but takes away time, energy, relationships, and often health. Shopping, dining, travel, and luxury purchases become ways to compensate for what your career costs you in other areas of life. You buy convenience to save time, luxury to feel pampered, and experiences to create the satisfaction that work isn't providing. This emotional spending feels justified because you're earning it through your professional sacrifices. But here's the trap. The more stressed or unfulfilled your work makes you, the more you spend to cope with those feelings, which keeps you financially dependent on the job that's causing the stress in the first place. You can't quit or reduce your hours because your lifestyle requires your full income. But your lifestyle exists primarily to cope with the demands of earning that income. This creates a psychological prison where spending becomes both the symptom of career stress and the reason you can't escape it. Your high income enables spending addiction that makes financial freedom impossible. I can see from your comments that emotional spending resonates with your experience. But here's what Freud discovered about the specific psychology of spending addiction in high earners. You develop tolerance where normal purchases stop providing satisfaction, requiring increasingly expensive purchases to get the same emotional reward. Like any addiction, spending addiction requires escalation to maintain effectiveness. The $50 dinner that once felt special becomes routine, so you need $200 dinners to feel the same satisfaction. The department store clothes that once excited you become ordinary, so you need designer pieces to get the same thrill. The domestic vacation that once felt luxurious becomes standard, so you need international trips to feel pampered. This escalation happens gradually and unconsciously, but it systematically increases your cost of living in ways that consume any income growth. The psychological reward of purchasing decreases over time, but your brain craves that reward, so you unconsciously seek bigger purchases to recreate the satisfaction. This tolerance effect means that high earners often spend proportionally more of their income than lower earners because they need more expensive purchases to achieve the same emotional payoff. Your spending isn't just keeping up with your income, it's accelerating faster than your income because you need bigger hits to feel the same satisfaction. Your insights about spending tolerance show growing awareness, but Freud discovered another crucial aspect of high earner spending addiction. You lose perspective on normal spending because you're surrounded by other high earners who normalize expensive consumption. Your peer group shifts from people who consider $100 a significant expense to people who spend $100 without thinking about it. This social recalibration makes expensive purchases feel normal rather than luxurious. You start believing that certain expenses are necessary for your professional or social position when they're actually just normalized by your high-earning peer group. Business dinners, networking events, professional wardrobe upgrades, and lifestyle maintenance that matches your position all become expected expenses rather than choices. This social pressure to maintain a certain image creates fixed expenses that feel mandatory rather than optional. Additionally, you often justify spending by comparing your income to your expenses rather than comparing your expenses to what's actually necessary for happiness or success. When you earn $200,000, a $2,000 monthly car payment feels reasonable because it's only 12% of your gross income, even though that same payment would seem outrageous to someone earning $50,000. This income relative thinking disguises expensive choices as reasonable ones. I can see from your responses that peer pressure influences spending decisions. But here's what Freud discovered about why high earners can't break spending cycles. You've organized your entire identity around consumption rather than accumulation. Your self-worth becomes tied to your ability to afford certain experiences, possessions, or lifestyle choices rather than your ability to build wealth. You measure success by your purchasing power rather than your net worth, which keeps you focused on cash flow instead of asset building. This identity shift is subtle but powerful. You begin to see yourself as someone who can afford expensive things, rather than someone who chooses to save money. This psychological reframing makes frugal choices feel like identity threats rather than financial wisdom. Choosing a less expensive option feels like diminishing yourself rather than making a smart financial decision. You start to believe that your spending level reflects your worth as a person, which makes it emotionally difficult to reduce expenses, even when financially necessary. The temporary satisfaction of purchasing maintains your identity as someone who can afford it, while saving money provides no immediate identity reinforcement. This means your spending serves psychological needs that saving cannot meet, which explains why logical financial advice often fails to change spending behavior in high earners. Your recognition of identity-driven spending reveals deep psychological patterns. But Freud discovered that high earners often use spending as a way to avoid confronting deeper questions about purpose and satisfaction. When you're busy earning and spending money, you don't have time or mental energy to examine whether your life is actually fulfilling. Shopping, upgrading, and consuming provide constant activity and decision-making that creates the illusion of progress and achievement. But this consumption-focused lifestyle often distracts from more fundamental questions about what you actually want from life beyond material comfort. Spending becomes a sophisticated avoidance mechanism that prevents you from examining whether your career, relationships, or life direction are actually satisfying. The constant cycle of earning and spending keeps you too busy to notice that you might be successful but not happy, financially comfortable but not emotionally fulfilled. This explains why many high earners feel trapped despite having financial options. They've used spending to avoid the inner work necessary to determine what would actually make them feel satisfied. Breaking spending addiction often requires confronting these deeper questions about purpose, which can be more challenging than simply changing financial habits. Your spending isn't just about wanting things. It's about avoiding the discomfort of examining what you really want from life. I can see from your comments that spending as avoidance resonates with many of you, but here's what Freud discovered about the most dangerous aspect of high earner spending addiction. You develop learned helplessness about controlling expenses because previous attempts to budget or reduce spending have failed. You've probably tried multiple times to get your spending under control, creating budgets, tracking expenses, setting savings goals. But these efforts typically fail because they address symptoms rather than the underlying psychological drivers. When willpower-based approaches don't work, you conclude that you're just bad with money, or that spending control is impossible for someone with your lifestyle demands. This learned helplessness keeps you trapped in spending cycles because you stop trying to change patterns that feel unchangeable. But spending addiction isn't a willpower problem. It's a psychology problem that requires different solutions than traditional budgeting advice. The reason you can't stick to spending limits isn't because you lack discipline. It's because your spending serves emotional and psychological functions that budgets don't address. Until you understand and address why you need to spend money for emotional regulation, identity maintenance, stress relief, and avoidance, no budget will be sustainable because you'll always find ways to override spending restrictions when psychological pressure builds. Your stories about failed budgeting attempts show common experiences. But Freud discovered the ultimate irony about high earner spending addiction. The financial security that high income should provide is destroyed by the spending behaviors that high income enables. You earn enough money to become genuinely wealthy, but you spend it fast enough to remain financially vulnerable. This creates a unique form of financial stress where you have access to money, but no accumulation of money. You live in constant anxiety about maintaining your income because your lifestyle depends on it. But you also live in constant temptation to spend that income because you can afford almost anything you want in the moment. This combination of financial capability and financial dependency creates psychological tension that often drives more spending as a way to cope with the stress of living paycheck to paycheck despite earning well. The irony is that your high income makes spending addiction more dangerous, not less, because it gives you access to credit and lifestyle inflation that lower earners can't reach. You can dig a deeper financial hole faster than someone who earns less, and your high income makes that hole less visible until it becomes dangerously deep. The solution isn't earning more money, it's changing your relationship with the money you already earn. As we conclude this exploration into why high earners live paycheck to paycheck, I want you to understand something profound that Freud discovered. Breaking spending addiction isn't about budgeting or willpower. It's about healing the emotional wounds and psychological needs that spending temporarily medicates. Your excessive spending is usually a symptom of deeper issues like stress, emptiness, identity confusion, or avoidance of difficult emotions or life questions. Until you address these underlying psychological drivers, any financial system you implement will eventually be overwhelmed by the emotional pressure that drives your spending compulsions. True financial freedom for high earners requires psychological work first. Understanding what you're really trying to achieve through spending, finding healthier ways to meet those psychological needs, and developing a relationship with money based on intentional choice rather than emotional reaction. This means learning to tolerate uncomfortable emotions without medicating them through purchases, building identity around values and relationships rather than consumption ability, and creating meaning in your life through purpose and connection rather than acquisition and experience. Your high income is a tool that can create genuine wealth and security, but only if you can resist the psychological pressure to spend it all maintaining a lifestyle designed to avoid the inner work necessary for authentic satisfaction. The goal isn't to stop enjoying money, it's to start using money intentionally rather than compulsively.